Hello, my name is Maddie, and my own sister emptied my savings account to buy luxury handbags and jewelry. And when I confronted my parents hoping for guidance or at least some accountability, they told me she was in a tough spot. That excuse, it was just the beginning. Over the next months, they went further. They used my name to open credit lines I'd never authorized. They sold my grandmother's necklace, an heirloom that held generations of memory. They even created a fake fundraiser painting me as the villain while pocketing donations behind my back. For years, I convinced myself that being the good daughter meant staying quiet. That silence was loyalty. That silence was love. But what happens when that silence costs you your identity, your future, even your own name? How far would your family go before you finally violently just say enough? The first red flag wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. A creeping hush that filled the room just before something awful made itself known. I remember the exact moment. I was sitting in the waiting room of Atlantic Bank, sipping bitter, watered-down coffee, mentally rehearsing the pitch for my mortgage. Everything was supposed to align perfectly. 10 years of work at the firm, an 800-plus credit score, no debt, and a modest but solid down payment I'd scraped together through years of discipline. No vacations, no splurges, just spreadsheets, sacrifices, and unwavering focus. I opened my banking app out of habit, just a routine check of my savings balance. The screen loaded and my heart caught. 6:43. I blinked. Refresh. Blink again. Then a notification popped up. Transaction approved. Dior, $7,200. No, that couldn't be happening. That account wasn't just money. It wasn't just numbers. It was sacred, a family emergency fund I had built with my own hands, my own discipline, and my own foresight. Only 3 people had accessed me, my mother Elaine and Delaney. I felt my blood run cold. The banker called my name. I walked into the meeting like a robot clutching my tote bag as if it could anchor me to something stable. She smiled politely. "Let's get started. I've reviewed your pre-approval file and I'm afraid there's a problem." My ears rang. "Excuse me, your credit scores have dropped over 100 points in the last 30 days. There are multiple overdrafts and a new installment plan looks like retail under your name. Did you open an account at Acme Looks recently?" I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. I just nodded like a shell of myself, as if my body had been hit by a truck and my mind was still processing the impact. When I finally staggered out to the parking lot, the cold air stung my skin. But inside, I was burning. Hands trembling, I dialed Delaney. No answer. My pulse raced as I drove straight to my parents' house, not even texting ahead. The front door was ajar. Delaney lounged on the porch swing, snapping selfies, a brand new designer bag resting beside her like a trophy. She didn't flinch when she saw me. "Hey, sis," she said, blowing a kiss toward her phone screen. "You drained the emergency account?" I said, voice low, controlled but trembling. "The one I built for the family." Delaney shrugged casually. "It was a self-esteem emergency. You know how hard things have been for me." I stepped forward. Fists clenched, heart racing. "That wasn't your money. That wasn't your emergency. That was mine." Elaine appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, that familiar posture she always took when she was about to downplay a crisis, as if my rage wasn't real, as if my fury wasn't justified. "She's been going through a rough time." Maddie Elaine said, her voice smooth, rehearsed, like she had delivered this line 1,000 times. "She needed a boost, and you always land on your feet." I snapped. "I just got denied for a mortgage." My voice cracked sharp and brittle, carrying every ounce of frustration I'd been holding back. Because of Delaney's shopping spree and whatever other mess she's pulled in my name? Elaine sighed, slow and deliberate, like I was the one being unreasonable. "She's your sister, Maddie. You can't treat her like she's an ATM." Victor lounged in the recliner behind her, beer in hand, pretending not to hear a word. Delaney stood nearby, flipping her hair like the world revolved around her, and I was merely scenery. "God, you're so dramatic," she said, voice dripping with amusement. "It's not like I bought a car or something. I just needed to feel normal again. Everyone expects me to look the part." I laughed, harsh, bitter, a sound that caught in my throat and felt foreign, like it didn't belong to me. Normal. You think this is normal? Elaine stepped forward, her tone sweet but sharp like ice wrapped in honey. Maddie, you're overreacting. She's in a tough spot. Try a little compassion. Tough spot. I repeated, voice low-controlled but edged with fury. You mean jobless by choice, maxed out on 5 credit cards, dropped out of 2 colleges? Delaney smirked, lips curling with that practiced arrogance. At least I'm not boring. Maybe if you weren't so uptight, people would actually like you. Her words hit me harder than I expected, not because they were true, but because they had been rehearsed. She had been waiting for the right moment for years to unleash them. I didn't respond. I just turned and walked out, keys digging into my palm teeth, gritted against the urge to scream. Back at my apartment, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even sit down. I opened my laptop and pulled up every transaction from the last 12 months, every overdraft, every unauthorized charge, every subtle betrayal disguised as entitlement. By midnight, I had color-coded tabs, pivot tables, and spreadsheets that could make a CPA weep. On a sticky note at the top of my monitor, I wrote one simple line. This time, I fix it by ending it. I wasn't just going to fix it. I was going to expose it. I barely slept. I spent the night staring at the columns of theft dressed up as entitlement, tracing the pattern, the audacity, the arrogance. But it wasn't the money that kept me awake. It was the way Delaney looked at me like I was the villain in her story, like I was holding her back from some God-given right to a luxury life I had worked 10 years to earn and still hadn't touched. The next morning, I took a long shower, letting the water wash away the fog of rage and frustration. I dressed in a gray sweater and jeans, pulled on my boots, and drove to my parents' house again, not for arguments, not for apologies, not for explanations. I wanted one thing. One small piece of myself back that hadn't been tainted yet. Grandma's necklace. A delicate gold chain with a tiny emerald leaf, something she wore every Sunday without fail. It was more than jewelry. It was history, memory, love, and lineage. A tangible connection to a family legacy that hadn't yet been corrupted by Delaney's recklessness, by my parents' enabling, by the world's indifference. I parked heart-hammering and stood at the doorstep for a moment. I wasn't just reclaiming a necklace. I was reclaiming proof that some things, my own roots, my own worth, could never be stolen. When she passed, Mom had kept it tucked away in her jewelry box, whispering to me that one day it would be mine. That tiny emerald leaf on a delicate gold chain wasn't just a necklace, it was a promise. A lineage, a piece of family that had survived generations waiting for me to claim it. When I walked in, Elaine was in the kitchen, methodically wiping down the counter like she hadn't just watched her daughter's credit collapse the week before. Victor lounged in the den, half asleep, flipping through channels with the volume muted. The house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and dust, a combination meant to convince visitors that everything was orderly, normal, unremarkable. I just came for the necklace, I said, skipping any of the usual greetings, the false pleasantries that were never genuine anyway. Elaine turned slowly, her eyes narrowing slightly. What necklace, Grandma's? I said, voice low but sharp, forcing the words out. The emerald one she left for me. The one she told Mom to save for me. Her posture stiffened. Oh, that, she said finally, voice hesitant. A beat passed, then another. We don't have it anymore. I blinked, disbelief tightening around my chest. What, we had to sell it? Delaney, Elaine added quickly, as if her words alone could justify the theft. She was in a really bad place emotionally. Delaney said from the hallway, voice casual, like she had no clue how much she'd just destroyed. She needed help. Victor's voice drifted from the den, casual and detached. It's just jewelry. You're making a big deal out of nothing. Something inside me snapped, not a brittle branch breaking, but a root being ripped out from the earth, pulling the very foundation of my trust, my patience, my family away. That necklace wasn't a trinket. It wasn't a fashion statement or an accessory. It was mine without debate, without condition. And now it was gone. Do you hear yourselves? I said, my voice rising. You sold something that wasn't yours. Again. Elaine crossed her arms, the picture of calm I had long ago learned to mistrust. We didn't think you'd notice. You never even asked about it. I laughed bitter and short a sound that tasted like betrayal. Because I trusted you? I spat. Her tone softened, but not her words. Honey, you make more money than all of us combined. We figured— No, I interrupted sharply. You decided again? Without me. Without asking. Elaine tilted her head, exhaling as if trying to explain away her conscience. You don't understand how hard it is for Delaney. She needs support. And what am I asked, voice steadier now but full of fire. A donor, a backup plan. Family means sharing everything, she said, voice sharpened now. No, I said, eyes locked on hers, burning with quiet fury. Family means respecting boundaries. That necklace was not yours to give away. It was mine. Victor muted the TV and leaned back incredulous. Jesus, Maddie, always so dramatic. You act like we pawned a kidney. I turned toward the door. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been twisted into guilt, into justification, into lessons I didn't need to learn. But as I passed the dresser, I caught a glimpse of the empty jewelry box. I remembered the day Grandma had given it to Mom, her voice soft but commanding. One day, Maddie will be ready. I had been ready then, naive enough to think they would honor that wish. Back in my car, I didn't drive. I just sat there, the cold of the interior biting at my skin while my chest burned from the betrayal, a fire no heat could put out. My hands shook as I opened my phone, the Notes app, blinking like a small sanctuary. I typed a new title. What they've taken. I started listing everything. Not dollars, not possessions, but time, peace, promises, respect, that necklace. The list grew longer than I expected. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for making it. The next morning, I woke up with a strange calm settling over me. A quiet certainty that something bigger had been happening all along. The necklace, the money, the fake job references, they weren't just isolated betrayals. They were a pattern, and patterns could be traced. And finally, they could be confronted. They weren't isolated incidents. Each one was a thread in a larger tapestry, a system my family had built around me without ever asking permission, without ever considering my voice, my boundaries, my life. It was a world where my name became currency, my trust a commodity, and my existence an open ledger for their convenience. I poured myself a black coffee, the steam curling like smoke signaling a war about to be waged, and sat down at the kitchen table. My laptop clicked open, its hum familiar and comforting, like the quiet before a storm. If there was one thing I trusted more than my instincts, it was my meticulous documentation habits. Every receipt, every statement, every ledger I'd ever touched was organized, cataloged, and preserved. Since I was 20, I had kept almost everything. It didn't take long for the first clue to surface. A loan from 2019 labeled Best Buy for $1.309. The item, a 70-inch Samsung Smart TV. I never bought it. I didn't even have cable that year. My name was listed as the guarantor, but when I downloaded the contract, the signature looked wrong, off, almost grotesque. Someone had traced it from a scanned document and stretched it into a poor imitation. Then I noticed the contact email Victor Mees, support@aol.com. My father's name and mine mashed together into a grotesque little lie. My chest tightened, not with shock, but with an icy clarity. I remembered asking about a dip in my credit back then. Dad had shrugged, smiling like the issue was a minor glitch. Probably some bank error, he'd said, voice casual, dismissive. Don't worry. These things sort themselves out. I believed him because at that time I still wanted to. I wanted to trust him, to believe in family, to believe in normalcy. I clicked open the spreadsheet I'd started in the car, now saved safely to my desktop. What they've taken. I scrolled down, adding a new line in bold, March 2019, Best Buy loan forged signature. I paused, fingers hovering over the title. Then deliberately I typed over it, what I'm taking back. Later that afternoon, I met Aunt Rachel at a small sunlit cafe on the corner. She was Mom's younger sister, the only relative who hadn't blindly sided with Delaney in every argument, every manipulation, every lie. She hugged me tightly when I arrived, the warmth of her embrace a rare anchor. You look exhausted, she murmured. I admitted the words, tasting bitter. Over cappuccinos, we started with small talk, the weather work, idle chatter. But after a pause, she leaned forward, lowering her voice so only I could hear. Maddie, I didn't want to say anything before, but your mom's been telling people you offered to support Delaney until she got on her feet. I froze mid-sip, my throat tight. Excuse me. She nodded, eyes flicking down. She's been saying it for years, that you agreed to help Delaney because you felt guilty for having more, that you promised to take care of her. I blinked, disoriented. I never said that. Never once. I know, Rachel whispered. But that's what they've been telling everyone. That it was your idea. That they didn't force you into anything. That they didn't take anything from you, they claim it was voluntary. I couldn't respond immediately. It felt like I'd stepped into someone else's memoir, one where I played the generous benefactor, not the exploited scapegoat. They had turned my life, my name, my identity into a story that suited them. A story that painted me as the villainless hero of their convenience. They used your name like a discount card, Rachel said softly, voice almost breaking. It was convenient. They didn't care if it hurt you. They just used you. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat a bitter knot. Nodding slowly, I stood to leave. Thank you for telling me. That means more than you know. Back home, the apartment was quiet, almost too quiet. I pulled out a dusty banker's box from the hall closet. Inside were old tax returns, lease agreements, credit reports, evidence waiting patiently for acknowledgement, waiting for me to finally face the truth. This wasn't just about money or necklaces or loans. It was about reclaiming my life piece by piece, line by line. I started flipping through the documents one by one, each page heavier than the last. Another loan, this one, a J.C. Penney credit card from 2016. A used car application from 2015 filed under my name. A payday loan from 2020 linked to an address I hadn't lived at since college. Every single one bore my name, every single one unauthorized. This wasn't a case of teenage recklessness or an isolated mistake. No, this was something far more deliberate, a system, a carefully structured pattern of fraud hidden beneath the polished veneer of a family crest. By the time I closed the last folder, my hands were surprisingly steady, even as my mind raced. They hadn't just taken from me, they had built an entire survival machine on the assumption that I would never notice. Or if I did that, I wouldn't fight back. They were wrong. For years, they had honed this method, perfected it, nurtured it with arrogance and entitlement. But I just became its final, unbreakable line. I was done watching in silence. By the end of that weekend, my apartment had transformed. My walls were papered with evidence printouts of bank statements, loan agreements, scanned copies of forged documents, every detail meticulously cataloged. Every file told a story of deceit, a narrative in which I had been reduced to a mere ledger entry, a name to exploit. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew one thing with certainty: I wasn't going to let them continue this. Monday morning brought a new, colder shock. I stopped at the mailbox on my way out, expecting the usual junk coupons, bills, maybe a flyer from a local pizzeria. Instead, a government envelope stared up at me. IRS. Urgent response required. My heart skipped, then hammered as I tore it open right there in the hallway. The letter claimed I had received unemployment benefits for 3 months the previous year. Benefits I had never claimed. Months I had worked every single day, documented with certificates from HR for perfect attendance. At first, I thought it was a phishing scam, some cruel digital prank. But then I saw my social security number, my full legal name, and an address I hadn't lived at in over 10 years, my parents' home. The bank account listed for deposit wasn't mine, yet the last 4 digits were eerily familiar. Delaney's checking account. I froze, the hallway around me disappearing. Cars passed outside. A dog barked in the distance. But in my mind, everything went silent. This wasn't just theft anymore. This wasn't family drama. This was federal fraud. At my desk that afternoon, I tried to navigate the bureaucratic nightmare. I called the IRS helpline, cycled through hold music and robotic prompts, and filed a dispute. But I knew the process would take months, maybe longer. Just when I thought it couldn't get worse, my phone rang. Maddie Price were calling about a flagged account listed under your name as cosigner. An $18,000 loan issued last spring. My heart stopped. What loan? I asked, voice barely audible. For a boat repair. The borrower listed was Victor Price. My father. My blood ran cold. The loan had defaulted last month, and now the collections department was preparing to pursue co-signers me for repayment. The agent continued almost casually. Ma'am, we're also obligated to inform you that due to your employment in financial services, this account has triggered an alert on your professional credit monitoring system. And just like that, my world tilted. By 3 p.m., Dex, my supervisor, had summoned me to his office. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse, but the tension in the room pressed down on me like a physical weight. Tight lips, furrowed brow, a glance that carried the full weight of silent judgment. Maddie, he said slowly, your credit flag came through compliance review. I know, I said quietly, almost too quietly. Look, if this is identity theft, it needs to be reported officially. He continued, carefully measured. Otherwise, it becomes a reputational risk for both you and the firm. He didn't say the word termination. He didn't have to. The threat was already there, hanging in the air, as real and tangible as the icy knot tightening in my stomach. That night, after pacing my apartment for what felt like hours, talking myself out of tears, for the 10th time, I finally forced myself into the car. The city lights blurred past as I gripped the steering wheel, every red light stretching out like the weight of everything I'd discovered. By the time I pulled into the Charlotte police station, my shoulders ached. My chest tightened and my hands were still trembling. Not with fear exactly, but with the cold, hard awareness that my life had been stolen from me piece by piece. I walked in, filing my report like a soldier stepping onto the battlefield. Detective Ardon was assigned to my case, a tall, commanding woman with salt and pepper hair pulled back into a no-nonsense bun, her posture perfectly straight, but her voice when she spoke carried an unexpected gentleness. You'd be shocked how many cases like yours involve family, she said as I laid out my meticulously organized folder of evidence. Every document, every printout, every annotated line of a loan or transaction was spread across her desk. Most people don't keep records this clean. I handed over the IRS letter, the boat loan details, and everything else I'd spent sleepless nights compiling. Ardon scanned them carefully, brow furrowed, eyes narrowing. After a long, heavy pause, she said, "This qualifies as felony fraud on both counts. They used your identity to obtain government funds and co-sign loans without your consent. That's bank fraud." I sat there, hands folded in my lap, feeling cold and numb rather than shaken. For years, I had believed that keeping my head down, working hard, and saving money would be enough to protect me. I always thought if I kept my head down, stayed disciplined, I'd be okay, I murmured almost to myself. Ardon leaned back, her expression unreadable but firm. People like your father and sister don't target strangers. They go after the ones least likely to report them. I met her gaze, a flicker of steel igniting in my chest. That changes tonight. She slid a card across the table. Keep documenting. Organize everything. We'll escalate this as it develops. As I left the station, the night air hitting my face, I felt something unfamiliar rising in me, resolve. Not fear, not anger, not despair. Resolve. And for the first time, I knew the next time they tried to silence me, I wouldn't face it alone. I'd bring a detective with me. By the following week, my apartment had become a war room. I had a manila folder labeled Active Fraud, stuffed with printed documents, USB backups, recorded calls, and my police report file number. Every piece of evidence meticulously cataloged, ready for court if necessary. Then the next blow came, this time through my work email. "Hey, heads up," Dex had written. I froze mid-sip of coffee. My stomach dropped. "I got a weird reference check call this morning for you, but it wasn't you." I walked straight to his office, heart hammering, and he handed me a printout. My name, my school, my credentials, but not my voice. The resume belonged to Delaney, posing as me applying for a high-level client advisor position with one of our competitors downtown, the very promotion I had been pursuing internally for months. Dex looked at me carefully. "They listed all the key accounts you've handled here. But the timeline's off. They're claiming joint experience with another rep we've never heard of. HR wants to pause your promotion review until we figure this out. The paper crinkled in my hands. I didn't need to guess. I knew that phrasing, that audacious, rehearsed tone. Delaney had used my identity again this time to fake her way into a career. I drew a slow, deliberate breath. My hands shook, but not from fear. Not this time. I was done reacting. That night, I traced the number listed under her professional references. Burner phone. Prepaid plan. Purchased just 2 days prior at a Walgreens near my parents' neighborhood. She hadn't just lied. She had built a carefully constructed, intricate web of forgery and deceit that stretched far beyond what I'd imagined. And I was done being the person who let it slide. I forwarded everything to Ardon, every shred of evidence I could find. The resume. The fake reference numbers, Dex's internal memo, even the notes I'd made tracking discrepancies in her timeline. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A new message from her. This qualifies as criminal impersonation with intent to defraud plus impersonation for hire. I let that sink in. It wasn't just identity theft anymore. Delaney wasn't simply borrowing my name, my work, my credentials. She was actively trying to replace me, to step into my life as if she had earned it. My stomach twisted, but there was no panic. Only a sharpened focus, the kind that comes from finally seeing the pattern clearly and knowing exactly where to draw the line. I didn't even think twice before grabbing my keys. The drive to my parents' house was automatic. I could navigate it blindfolded by now, but this wasn't a casual visit. This was a declaration, a line in the sand. Elaine opened the door, the familiar, weary sigh escaping her lips. Maddie, can we not do this again? We're tired of the accusations. I'm not here to talk. I said, my voice calm but lethal. I'm here to document. She scoffed, crossing her arms as though I'd asked her to do something absurd. Oh, for heaven's sake, Delaney just came downstairs in one of her faux designer blazers. You just love playing the victim. Maybe if you had a personality, you'd get a job offer too. I didn't flinch. I held up the envelope in my hand. Sealed. Labeled. Evidence. That's the resume you submitted to Bowen Financial. That's the fake reference number. And that I pointed to the page with her photo is the final time you will ever use my name for anything. Elaine rolled her eyes, but the sound felt hollow. You're being so dramatic. Victor, as usual, lounged in his recliner, fingers scrolling over his phone, utterly disengaged. You wouldn't actually put your sister in jail, he murmured without looking up. I turned to him, voice cold measured, but carrying a weight that made the room still. Try me. For a long moment, nobody moved. Even the dog seemed to sense the shift in the air, tilting its head and staying silent. I continued steady and precise. I've already filed a police report. The next time this happens, there won't be a warning. You'll hear about it from the DA's office. Delaney's expression flickered just for a second, but it was enough. Fear, recognition. That instant told me she understood the line I'd drawn. I walked out before they could offer another excuse, another attempt to gaslight me, another claim that they had a right to my life. Back home, I added a new page to the digital folder I'd built for Ardan. Entry 3284. Subject impersonated me professionally. Evidence provided. Verbal cease issued. Family confirmed. Defiant. I wasn't doing this to scare them anymore. I wasn't looking for apologies or groveling. I was building a record. A timeline, a wall, a fortress of proof they could not climb, could not manipulate, could not deny. They didn't believe me when I said this was their last warning. They will. The next morning began with the familiar bitterness of stale coffee and a headache that felt like it had been earned through sheer vigilance. I sat at my kitchen table, a small fortress of crumpled tax forms, half-finished folders, and stray sticky notes with reminders I couldn't quite trust myself to ignore. The inbox pinged incessantly, each new message a tiny weight pressing against my skull, none of it urgent, all of it demanding attention I didn't have. Then my phone lit up. Romy. I didn't even greet her. Hey, she said, voice breathless, as if she'd run across the city or up 3 flights of stairs just to reach me. You need to come here. Now. Her tone carried more meaning than 1,000 words. No explanation. No excuses, just urgency. 15 minutes later, I was striding into her office building, still wearing yesterday's sweater, the same jeans I had cried in the night before my hair pulled back in a lazy knot. My heart thumped, not with fear exactly, but a cold, steady dread I couldn't shake. Romy was waiting near the front desk, manila envelope clutched in her hands like it might bite her. Her eyes were wide, the kind of wide that said she had seen something she wasn't meant to see. I didn't sit. I didn't need to. I was helping a walk-in with a title issue. She began hesitating as if every word cost her energy. It's Delaney. Of course it was. My stomach had been bracing for this, but nothing could have prepared me. My name, my identity on the cosigner line. My chest tightened until it felt like stone. "You're kidding," I whispered. Romy handed me the envelope. Inside were neatly printed documents clipped together, heavy with the weight of legality, DMV forms, notarized signatures, vehicle registration papers. My name sat there beneath the car like a false blessing, my signature imperfect, close enough to fool the inattentive, but far enough from the truth to scream forgery to anyone looking carefully. And Romy had looked carefully. "She filed this last week," Romy said, her voice low, almost reverent in horror. "And there's more." She pulled out another sheet and laid it flat on her desk, a home equity line, my name again tied to my parents' house. My mouth went dry, my throat tightening. "You're serious?" I croaked. She nodded grimly. "It's official. They waited until after your warning." I sank into the nearest chair. My hands gripped the arms like anchors. "They didn't just ignore me," I said softly. "They tested me. They're gambling. They think you won't follow through. They're betting on the same silence you've always given them," Romy said. Then her eyes softened, a glimmer of defiance shared between us. "But they forgot something." I raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "You're not that girl anymore." For the next hour, we cross-referenced every form, every VIN number, every date, every address, every line of bank info. Romy, a licensed notary with access to verification tools I didn't even know existed, moved through the documents with precision that was clinical and almost cruel. "Same handwriting across both forms," she said, pointing to the forged entries. "Your signature nowhere close. And look, Delaney even spelled your middle name wrong on the home equity line." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Rage, disbelief, exhaustion, and a flicker of vindication all rolled together in that exhale. They had overplayed their hand. They had waited, tested boundaries, forged legal documents under my name, but they had misjudged me. I wasn't that girl who quietly tolerated betrayal anymore. This time I was ready. Sloppy, arrogant, lazy, but deliberate. I whispered it to myself, each word tasting like ash. They weren't just stealing from me anymore. No, they were constructing their entire survival, every excuse, every indulgence on the foundation of my silence. I felt the weight of it settle in my chest like a stone, heavy and immovable. Romy didn't argue. She didn't need to. She simply reached for her phone, her fingers moving with the kind of precision that matched my own growing fury, and began photographing every piece of evidence spread across the table. "Come on," she said, voice steady but urgent, tossing her car keys onto the counter. "You're not fighting this alone." By mid-afternoon, we were sitting in a quiet interview room at the Charlotte police station. The walls were bland beige, the lights harsh and sterile, but oddly I felt calm, focused even. This was what clarity looked like. The air thick with accountability, the hum of fluorescent bulbs amplifying every heartbeat. Detective Ardon arrived 5 minutes later, clipboard in hand, her salt and pepper hair pulled back into a tight ponytail. She'd seen me before when I filed my initial identity theft report, but this time there was a shift in her demeanor. Her eyes were sharper, her posture taut like a soldier preparing for a battle she already knew would be hard-fought. I laid the folder on the table with deliberate care, every page meticulously labeled, every detail logged. Vehicle registrations with forged cosigner lines. Home equity forms listing me as guarantor without consent. Romy's notarized witness statement, steady and undeniable. Ardon picked up the first set, flipped through each page slowly, then tapped her pen twice on the table, deliberate and measured. This isn't a civil dispute anymore. She said, her voice calm but edged with authority. This is multiple felonies. Co-signer fraud, false declarations on financial instruments, identity misuse across state records, across state lines. I nodded once, firm and unshakable. I want to press charges. Arden raised an eyebrow, scanning me like she was gauging how far I would go. No more warnings, I said, locking eyes with her. Not this time. She gave a subtle nod, made a quick note, and slid a case intake form toward me. Then let's get started, she said. That night, I sat on my couch, Thai takeout cold in a plastic container I barely touched, and a bottle of red wine that tasted like dust and old regrets. I had told Romy not to worry to stay home, but true to form, she showed up anyway, as loyal as ever. After a few minutes of quiet, she pulled out her phone and looked at me with that familiar mixture of concern and urgency. I wasn't going to tell you until later, she said, her voice low, but you need to hear this. She hit play. The crackle of a voicemail filled the room, the air thickening with it. Delaney's voice sharp light. Smug cut through the quiet like glass breaking. Don't stress. Worst case, Maddie bails me out again. That's what big sisters do, right? The sound of her laugh made something deep inside me recoil, a visceral twisting knot of rage and disbelief. Romy's gaze was steady, unflinching. She left that after filing the car loan, Romy said softly. Thought we wouldn't notice. Thought you wouldn't. I stared at the screen, letting the words and tones sink into me, then lifted the wine glass to my lips and took a long, measured sip. I hope the court hears it too, I said finally. Romy raised her glass in a quiet salute. To war, she murmured. I didn't clink glasses. I didn't smile. I didn't make any gesture of camaraderie. I opened my laptop and created a new folder on my desktop, court prep. Inside, I dragged every document I had, every screenshot, every photo, every trace of every lie. They had used my trust, my credit, my history against me. They had underestimated me, thinking silence equaled weakness. They forgot one crucial truth. I wasn't quiet because I was scared. I was quiet because I was calculating. And now calculation had a name, a folder, and a path straight to justice. Now I wasn't calculating anymore. I wasn't sitting back weighing evidence or plotting quietly in the shadows. No. Now I was moving. I was coming. And I hoped they'd packed light because I wasn't just bringing paperwork. I wasn't just bringing the law. I was bringing fire, the kind that burned clean and bright, the kind that left nothing standing in its path but truth. The next morning unfolded like any other deceptively ordinary, almost innocent in its quietness. Sweatpants hair twisted into a careless bun, lukewarm coffee in hand. I scrolled through a mountain of unread emails with the mechanical patience of someone who had already seen too much. Then my phone buzzed, jolting me from the monotony. A text from Jen Harper. My college roommate, the one I hadn't spoken to in over a year since she'd moved to Seattle. My thumb hovered over the notification heart, already picking up speed. Her message was simple. 2 words. Is this really you? Below it was a link, one link, and curiosity confusion. A flicker of dread pushed me to click. The page loaded, slow, deliberate, as if it too knew the weight it carried. GoFundMe. The title alone made my stomach drop. Help us save our family. Victim of legal misunderstanding. My breath caught before my eyes had even finished scanning. There I was, staring back at me from the screen. My face, my name in bold type plastered across a digital plea for sympathy. Cherry-picked photos of childhood memories curated like a gallery of lies, Delaney and I building sandcastles at Myrtle Beach, wrapped in matching scarves by the Christmas tree, hugging on my 6th birthday while I blew out the candles. Images that should have been sweet, innocent, nostalgic, turned into ammunition. Beneath the photos, the words made my chest constrict like a fist had wrapped around it. Our daughter is suing us over a simple mistake. We're about to lose our home. Please help us survive this cruel betrayal. Family is everything, and ours is being torn apart by legal threats and bitterness. Anything helps. I scrolled down. 20,000 shares, nearly $9,000 raised. Comments poured in. My stomach twisted with every line, every judgment, every sneer from strangers who didn't know the truth, who had no context. Only the story my family had fed them. Who takes their parents to court over money, ungrateful brat? Must have been spoiled her whole life. This generation is disgusting. Heartless witch. Imagine doing this to your own blood. I sank onto the edge of the bedphone, slipping from my fingers as my hands trembled, not from fear, not from anger, but from something colder, something sharper. Humiliation. Shame. The kind that doesn't come from strangers, but from the ones who are supposed to love you unconditionally. My own family had weaponized my life, my memories, my face. They hadn't just stolen money. They had stolen the story of me, every shared moment twisted into a narrative designed to vilify me. Then the pings started. 1, 2, 3. Delaney, I haven't slept in days. I can't breathe. I might do something stupid and it'll be your fault. Before I could process it, another arrived. You win. Okay, just take your stupid pride and go. I'm done. And then one more. From Mom. Do you even care what this is doing to your father? His blood pressure is through the roof. He could die. Maddie, think about that before you run to your police friends again. There it was again. Not remorse, not apology, just pressure. Emotional manipulation dressed in concern, perfumed with guilt. The same playbook they had run for my entire life. Guilt masquerading as love, coercion masquerading as family, all designed to keep me quiet, compliant, erased. But now, none of it would work. Now I wasn't calculating. I wasn't waiting. I wasn't silent. I was awake. And this time, they would see every piece of what they'd done in all its detail with all its consequences. Control masquerading as concern. The words hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. I inhaled, slow and deliberate. My hands, which had trembled just moments before, steadied. Then methodically, I began taking screenshots, every word, every veiled threat, every line of gaslighting they'd perfected over years, polished to a sinister gleam. Each image, each text, each distorted plea for sympathy became evidence in a ledger I was building with surgical precision. I picked up my phone and dialed Detective Ardon. No explanation. No preamble. She simply said, "Come in." At the station, the fluorescent lights still blazed with unforgiving harshness, the air-conditioned chill wrapping around me like a shroud. I sat across from her, heart pounding but spine straight. This time I didn't feel small. I laid everything before her, the GoFundMe page, the caption dripping with fabricated pain, the childhood photos curated to manipulate the texts from my family dripping with guilt and veiled threats. Ardon's expression shifted, darkening as she scrolled through the evidence. Her hands folded neatly over the file, calm, precise, but her voice cut like steel. "This isn't family drama anymore," she said. "This is public defamation, digital fraud, manipulation on a professional scale." She rose, grabbed her tablet, and began drafting a memo with deliberate force. "We're forwarding this to the DA's office. I'll request an emergency injunction to freeze the funds before they vanish into yet another luxury handbag." Her words landed in my chest with a hard, solid thump. I nodded, feeling a measure of relief I hadn't felt in years. Before leaving the station, I sent the fundraiser link along with every screenshot to my company's legal department. I had learned my lesson the hard way. I wouldn't let lies, no matter how cleverly crafted, seep into my professional life unnoticed again. By sundown, the GoFundMe page had been suspended pending investigation. But the damage lingered like smoke curling through a house long after the fire had been doused. My inbox flooded with messages, not from work, but from people I hadn't heard from in years. Some were tender, cautious. "Hey, I don't know what's happening, but I hope you're okay. Let me know if you need anything." Others cut sharper, dressed in doubt and suspicion. "Your mom looked really upset in that photo. Is any of it true? This doesn't sound like you. Are you sure you're not overreacting? You've changed." None of them were malicious, but it stung anyway. When you spend a lifetime being the good daughter, the responsible one, the one who never makes waves, the world struggles to accept it when you finally stand and say enough. That night, Romy came over carrying her laptop like a shield, her eyes burning with focused fury. She didn't speak immediately. She set the device on the kitchen table, sat beside me, and finally said, "We need to respond. Not emotionally. Legally. Strategically." She scrolled through the fundraiser's content and shook her head. "We didn't write a paragraph. We didn't beg the world to see our side. We didn't plead to strangers who had already decided you were the villain. One line. That's all the truth needs. Documentation. And we have it." Together, we filed a copyright claim on every image they'd stolen and misused. Within an hour, the collage vanished from public view. But the comments, the whispers, the judgments, they lingered like smoke refusing to leave a burned room. I didn't reply to a single one. I owed no one my pain. I wasn't seeking sympathy. I was done trying to earn anyone's approval. This wasn't a PR crisis, it was justice in progress. They had assumed I would cower under the weight of public exposure, that I would crumble beneath the scrutiny they had orchestrated. But they had forgotten one crucial truth: I kept receipts. I had witnesses. I was ready to testify. The next voicemail came just as the first slivers of sunlight pierced the blinds, streaking across the cluttered kitchen table, littered with legal pads and half-eaten takeout containers. My phone vibrated, urgently insistent against the wood. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew the voice before she even said my name. "You should be ashamed of yourself." Elaine hissed, each syllable sharp, shallow, theatrical. "Your father collapsed last night. The doctors say it's stress. His blood pressure is through the roof. Are you happy now?" No greeting, no context, no concern for whether he was stable or conscious. Just blame, performance coercion, masquerading as worry. The same toxic playbook my family had used my entire life, guilt disguised as love-fear, masquerading as care. But now this time I wasn't shrinking. I wasn't listening. I was preparing to fight. Just another guilt missile launched with precision and coated in maternal venom. Not 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time a text from Delaney. "If Dad dies, it's on you." Not "we're scared," not "he's stable now." Nothing resembling concern or context, just weaponized blame designed to tighten the chest and hollow out the stomach. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I grabbed my keys not out of worry, not out of concern, but because I needed confirmation, a touchstone of truth. At this point, I trusted hospital monitors more than I trusted my family. By the time I reached the hospital, I gave my name at the front desk and braced myself for the theater I half expected. "Room 312. The nurse said, tilting her head with polite sympathy. I pushed the door open quietly. Victor lay in the bed, IV snaking into his arm, the steady hum of the monitors filling the air. His eyes were closed, motionless. He didn't stir when I entered, didn't twitch, didn't acknowledge the tension thickening the room. Elaine sat rigid in the corner, arms crossed so tightly I could see her knuckles whiten. She wasn't the posture of a worried wife. No, this was the stance of a woman preparing for war. Her gaze flicked up at me, sharp and impatient. "What now?" she snapped. "Here to serve a subpoena at his bedside," I said evenly. No flinch, no edge, just truth. Her eyes narrowed. "Oh, please. Did you forge my signature again?" Her jaw clenched. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again like she was rehearsing a line she never wanted to say out loud. Finally, she let out a bitter, dry laugh. "You always had to make everything harder," she said. "You always had to be the good one." I never asked for that. I replied, my voice calm, precise, unwavering. "I just stopped letting you take things." Victor didn't move. Not a word. Not a blink. Not a twitch. Maybe he was asleep. Maybe he was pretending. Maybe he'd been playing that passive-aggressive theater my whole life. I didn't wait to figure it out. I turned and walked out, the beep of the monitors trailing me like a metronome, a solemn reminder of everything they had taken and tried to weaponize against me. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my phone rang again. "Detective Ardan." "Brace yourself," he said, voice clipped direct. I braced. "Delaney and your father just filed a power of attorney in your name. Backdated. Notarized by someone who left the state 2 days ago." My throat went dry. "What for?" I asked, my voice ice. They're trying to reroute court summons refinance the house gain legal authority under your name. They forged it again. I didn't hesitate. I didn't cry. I didn't pause to shake or scream. We caught it early, I said, steady measured. But this is no longer petty theft. This is felony fraud across multiple jurisdictions. Appointments already set. 2 mornings later, I stood on the cold granite steps of the Mecklenburg County Courthouse. The wind bit at my cheeks. I wrapped my coat tighter, the sun low and harsh behind the stone columns. Every step I took toward that building felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that had been buried beneath years of lies, theft, and manipulation. I was done being quiet. I was done being complicit. The law was no longer an abstract concept. It was my shield, my sword, and the final arbiter of everything they had tried to steal from me. My arms were heavy laden with binders, folders, printed screenshots, and notarized statements. Each piece of paper felt like a small weapon in a war that had been waged quietly for years. Ms. Lynn, my attorney, moved ahead of me with that calm, measured confidence that made her seem untouchable. Dressed head to toe in black, a silent armor of professionalism. Detective Ardon walked beside me, a human shield, her presence grounding me as we stepped into the courtroom. Inside the room was colder than I expected. Not the chill of the air conditioning, but something deeper. A stillness steeped in judgment, history, and expectation. Across the room, my parents and Delaney sat like statues carved from guilt and denial. Elaine wore her blazer like armor, shoulders squared, lips pressed into a rigid line of martyrdom. Delaney's eyes shimmered with tears. Convenient crocodile tears timed perfectly for effect. Victor looked smaller than I had ever seen him, slouched in the chair as if the weight of reality had finally noticed him. I didn't look away. Ms. Lynn presented our case with the precision of a surgeon slicing through silk. Every document, every page, every screenshot was delivered with care, each one a piece of undeniable truth. Bank statements, loan documents, forged emails, signatures stretched into lies, screenshots of Delaney's GoFundMe, altered photos weaponized against me, the fake resume, voice messages, fraud reports, the notarized power of attorney filed behind my back. They were all there. Their attorney tried the old angle, weak and trembling with familiarity, the family plea. A misunderstanding, he said. A misstep, not malicious intent. A cry for help misread as betrayal. Ms. Lynn didn't blink. This is not a family squabble, she said, her voice calm, measured, deadly precise. This is coordinated identity theft. Wire fraud, financial coercion, and impersonation with intent to defraud. The judge, a man in his 60s with a face carved from years of storms and contemplation, turned to me. Ms. Carson, he said, voice carrying across the room. Would you like to make a statement? I stood. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't crack. I drew in a breath that tasted of years of endurance, of quiet calculation, of finally refusing to be silenced. Yes, Your Honor. I said, my voice steady, carrying every ounce of anger, grief, and clarity I had collected over a decade. I looked at the bench, then at my family, then at the room itself, the room that would mark the turning point in a cycle that had tried to bury me alive. They say family means unconditional love, but when love comes with conditions, silence, submission, sacrifice, it stops being love. It becomes leverage, a weapon, a currency to be traded. I'm not here for vengeance. I'm here because survival has led me here. I'm here to reclaim my name, the one they used like currency, signed away without permission, buried beneath excuses and sob stories. I paused, letting the weight of each word settle into the room. They didn't just steal money. They stole my time, my peace, my reputation. They expected me to stay quiet because I shared their blood. I am done being quiet. The room was silent. Delaney stared at the floor, unable or unwilling to meet my gaze. Elaine blinked, slowly measured, but said nothing. Victor remained still as though the gravity of the moment had finally grounded him. The judge nodded, jotting notes on his pad, absorbing the weight of my testimony. I didn't wait for the verdict. I didn't need it to know that the cycle had broken. I had spoken. I had been heard. And for the first time in a lifetime, my name was mine again. I walked out of that courtroom not with the fireworks of triumph, Not with the hollow roar of applause, but with clarity, the kind that settles deep in your bones and refuses to leave. That day, I didn't just win a case. I took back my name. For the first time in years, it felt truly mine again, untarnished, unborrowed, unmanipulated. The courthouse steps beneath my feet were warmer than they should have been for early May, the sunlight striking through the columns and casting long shadows as though the universe itself had paused to mark the moment. I sat in my car windows, cracked to let in the spring air, holding the official copy of the verdict. Delaney guilty of multiple counts fraud, identity theft, falsifying legal documents. Victor and Elaine suspended sentences, full restitution, ordered all fraudulent accounts in my name, closed, reversed, and cleared. There was no cheering, no confetti, no balloons. Just the slow, sacred, almost holy satisfaction of a name restored, a life recalibrated. Inside the courtroom, Delaney had cried, face buried in her hands, a mixture of anger, shame, and disbelief etched in every line of her posture. Elaine didn't react at all, her expression unreadable, stoic, distant. Victor kept glancing downward as though the floor might yield some secret answer he couldn't find in himself. I didn't watch them leave. I walked out with my attorney, nodded once to Detective Ardon, and exhaled a breath I didn't know I had been holding. There was no room left in my body for pity or resentment, only a still, steady peace. 2 weeks later, I stepped into my new condo. Sunlight pooled through the wide windows, bouncing off the pale walls and fresh paint. The air smelled faintly of renewal of beginnings. It wasn't a grand space. It didn't need to be. It was mine. Bought with clean credit, earned without guilt, untouched by manipulation or deceit. Romy stopped by that evening, a bottle of sparkling cider in hand, her grin as steady as mine felt. Detective Ardon left a card on the counter, handwritten words beneath his badge number. Call anytime. I laughed a soft, pure sound that didn't carry bitterness or exhaustion. For the first time in months, I laughed freely. That night, an email appeared in my inbox from a local women's center. Someone from my office had referred me. Would I speak on financial abuse? They were hosting a seminar next month and wanted my perspective. At first, I almost declined. I thought about the weight of retelling every humiliation, every theft, every manipulation. But then I typed back, only if I can tell the truth. Every ugly part. Every strong part. Weeks later, I stood on a small stage no bigger than a yoga mat, staring out at a sea of faces, mostly women, some already nodding before I'd even spoken, as if they had lived the first half of my story themselves. I cleared my throat. My sister emptied my savings account to buy luxury goods. My parents told me she was in a tough spot, so I stopped being their safety net. I became my own protector. No one clapped. They didn't need to. Their silence carried weight recognition, understanding the kind of acknowledgement that doesn't need applause. Afterward, a woman in her 60s approached me, eyes glistening. You put into words something I never could, she whispered. Thank you. That moment, the depth of connection, the unspoken understanding meant more than any verdict ever could. One morning, a letter arrived. No return address. The handwriting was unmistakable. Elaine. I held it carefully, turned it over in my hands, and read the words slowly. We lost a daughter while trying to save another. I folded the letter and let the silence settle around me. For the first time, I realized I had survived. I had reclaimed my name. I had rebuilt my life. And in that stillness, there was nothing left to fear. If you ever want to talk, you know where to find me. I read her note once, folded it carefully, and tucked it into the back of my nightstand drawer. Not in the trash, not on the mantle for anyone to see, just quietly out of the way. That chapter is closed, but I am still the one holding the pen. They wanted me to carry their chaos, to bend under the weight of their choices. Instead, I built something solid, something unshakable. And for the first time in years, I sleep just fine. Sometimes the hardest decisions aren't about choosing between right and wrong. They're about choosing yourself after a lifetime of being told that your needs, your voice, your peace don't matter. I used to think being the responsible one meant carrying everyone else's burdens. I thought loyalty meant staying silent even when it cut me down. I thought love meant endless sacrifice even if it tore me apart. But here's the truth I learned the hard way. Setting boundaries doesn't make you cruel. Speaking up doesn't make you broken. Walking away doesn't mean you've given up on family. It means you are finally showing up for yourself, finally claiming your own worth. If you've ever been made to feel guilty for protecting your peace, let me say this plainly, you are not wrong. You are allowed to protect your name, your future, your freedom. I am not the same woman who stayed quiet while they emptied my accounts, forged my identity, and rewrote my story. I am the woman who took it back. I am the woman who faced them, the system, and myself, and reclaimed what was mine. I sleep just fine now. And you can too. What about you? Have you ever had to stand up to someone you love just to protect yourself? Do you believe family should have limits, or is loyalty unconditional no matter the cost? Share your thoughts in the comments. Drop a 1 if this story spoke to you, or just tell me where you're watching from. And if this story moved you, gave you strength, or helped you reflect, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. Here we share real stories, raw, unfiltered, and true, because somewhere someone out there needs to hear them. Thank you for being here.